All in all, I would say a fairly entertaining card. The prelims were a little bit slow in Jacksonville. This was the ABC card. Some nice performances. Tabitha Ritchie, impressive against Jillian Robertson. Neil Magny, once again, getting a win and continuing to be one of the winningest fighters in UFC history. What about Brendan Allen? He looked good against Bruno Silva. David Onama looked very good against Gabriel Santos. The Austin Lane, Justin Tava fight ended very unceremoniously with that eye poke. Macy Barber had perhaps her best performance to date in the UFC with the win over Amanda Ribas. But of course, Ilia Topuria was the star of the show. And let me ask the guys, and especially GC, who seems to have been smitten by Ilia Topuria. You loved this performance, so much so that you actually went for paella last night, correct?
Yeah. So
in honor of him.
Yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to get paella, and then, as we were leading up to the fight, I was talking with my girlfriend, and the last time Ilia Topuria came on the show came up, and I was like, oh, yeah, he came on, and he promised if you ever went to Spain, you guys would get paella together. And then I was like, yeah, I still haven't gotten paella. I still need to do that. And I was like, you know what? If Ilia wins on Saturday, we'll go on Sunday and get paella. And sure enough, he won, and paella was just fantastic.
First time ever.
First time ever. Got croquetas, Spanish tortilla. Did the churros and chocolate for dessert. I mean, the whole ordeal. It was fantastic. It was a beautiful evening of eating.
Now, what do we have? Like full seafood? Is it everything?
Yeah, we're talking. It was like the chicken, the sausage. Then it was like squid, the oysters, shrimp, whitefish. It was the whole kit.
Wait, you had the chicken, the sausage, and the seafood?
It was everything. It was everything.
Whoa, yeah. I've never had it mixed. I usually like to keep my seafood and chicken separate.
Surf and turf.
It was fantastic.
Wow.
It was fantastic. Yeah, the chorizo went perfectly with it. It was a fantastic experience. Was a little let down, I guess. I wouldn't say let down. I was kind of confused. I always imagine the pan being like very deep, and then it's like thin. That's how they get like the crispiness of the rice. It was fantastic.
Was there enough rice in yours?
Oh, yeah, more than enough.
Okay. Better than the poutine?
Oh, man. So one person compared, they were like, oh, man, someone needs to be arrested, who's ever preparing your food. First the poutine, then this. I was like, I mean, this was delicious. This was fantastic. 5 stars. The poutine, I get. This was not that.
Yeah, that's silly. It's like, what, you got the paella from the same place as the poutine?
No, this was high level stuff here.
By the way, everyone on fucking social media is a cooking expert.
Oh yeah, you have to know what you're getting into. Having shared my English breakfasts, you have to know what you're getting into when you post food.
I would go so far as to say everybody on social media is an everything expert.
That's
just
true.
Know it all.
That's a good point.
Rick, looking tan, man.
Yeah,
I've been outside a little bit.
Good, dude.
Wow,
Amityville, sun shining.
Where you at?
Shining.
Local pool?
Well, I have a pool in the backyard.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Is this
struggle is real?
Must be nice.
We don't go to the old watering hole.
Wow.
Appreciate the invite.
How was the barbecue?
You had a barbecue? You didn't invite us?
No. See, Frank, you're using the wrong term, right? It'd be a grill, right? Because barbecue would imply like the ribs and we've gone over this. I've just been outside playing a little basketball, eating right, exercising. Just getting right for summer. Getting right for summer. Haircut.
Haircut is a little beard trim.
I haven't been here in 10, 11 days. I had
that's
to
a good point.
Put in the work.
I had to put in some work.
That's a good point because we didn't have a Monday show last week. But you'll be back for the Wednesday show. You're putting in some extra time. We appreciate that.
I wouldn't miss it.
So Topuria, is he going to be a champ?
There's not a lot of people that I kind of like earmark as a future champion. Hamzat is a guy that I've since the beginning kind of believed. Topuria feels like one of the other ones. He feels like a guy that I'm ready to say like the combination of skills between his striking, the ability to fight at the high level, the grappling, putting it all together. He seems like a guy who's a champion. The problem is he's in a division ruled by the pound for pound best fighter in the world, which is a difficult hill to climb. And then you've got a guy like Max Holloway, who's another obstacle, a second kind of hurdle to cross in that division. So it's a very tough division to get to the top of. But it feels like at some point he's going to be a champion. If I'm making a lifetime future bet, right, it might not be this year, but if I'm able to say, like, is this guy going to be a champion, yes or no, I have to feel like Ilia Topuria is going to be a champion.
Certainly going to fight for a belt.
at some point.
in the very near future. The question is, if Alex Volkanovski beats Yair Rodriguez on July 8th, what does he do then? We suspect that Charles Oliveira is fighting Islam. Volkanovski, isn't one to wait, right? I don't think he's fighting in July and then not fighting for the rest of the year. Seems a little bit unlike him. So would Topuria then get the winner of that fight? If Yair wins, everything is up in the air, right? They probably run it back with Volkanovski, et cetera, et cetera. Then don't forget Max Holloway's fighting end of August. So he's going to have to wait regardless. It's only 2 months, but how quickly does Max Holloway return? And does Max Holloway want to fight at Ilia Topuria? This guy's on the come up. Holloway not that old, but he's allowed to pick and choose. I think he's earned that. I saw Ilia say he would fight him. What Ilia said, and we're going to talk to Ilia in about 16 minutes, he said, I would fight Max in Spain. Otherwise, I'm waiting for the belt. I know they never say that fights are number one contenders fights, but I never really viewed this fight as a number one contender fight. To me, it's like one more, and then you're the number one contender. I don't know. Is this enough for a number one contender spot?
For me, yeah. I mean, think of Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez's last 2 fights, or last 3, let's go back, right? 3 fights ago, lost to Max Holloway.
Yeah.
Then the weird kind of finish in the Brian Ortega fight. And I'm not trying to discredit that win. He was on his path to victory, just weird circumstances. And then he beat Josh Emmett. So if you're Ilia Topuria, who's been a lot cleaner in that run, and then absolutely smoked Josh Emmett, it'd be hard for me to say he couldn't jump in there. Would I like to see him fight one more time, especially against a guy like Max Holloway? I would personally. But if you're telling me on the scope of UFC title shots that have been handed out recently, you could do a lot worse than giving Ilia Topuria a title shot at this.
Okay,
spot.
so then so the other side of the coin is let's not make the same mistake that we made with Arnold Allen, right? If you match him up with Max and Max wins, now you've just killed off 2 potential title contenders.
Here, I see that argument, and I went to Twitter and said that I'd like to see Ilia versus Max next. I get that argument, but at a certain point, Robert Whittaker and Max Holloway are just going to have to get fights, and at a certain point, people are going to have to beat them. And the idea that these guys are knocking off the contenders so they can never fight anybody high level just doesn't work for me. I want to see Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria fight at the end of the day. It's okay for me if he loses. By the way, I just laid out a path. Yair Rodriguez literally lost to Max Holloway 3 fights ago. And then 2 fights later, he's fighting for the title. So this idea that Max Holloway is this unsurmountable obstacle that we need to avoid and throw him into a fight with Volk, I just don't love the logic of that. I get it, because Volk has been so good at killing contenders, and so has Max, quite frankly. I want to see that fight. I'm okay with the idea if Ilia could win or lose. And if he wins, imagine the momentum he'd have going into a fight with Alexander Volkanovski or Yair Rodriguez for the title. I feel like it would make him a bulletproof kind of contender and star. But I also get the argument. I get it. I get why you wouldn't want to risk it. But, man, quite frankly, I just think he's ready. I think he's ready for that step. I think he's ready to fight a guy like Max. But he's also ready to fight a guy like Volk. So it's a tough situation, but I personally have trouble with the idea of avoid Robert Whittaker and avoid Max Holloway the plague if you're a contender. I don't love that
I know.
strategy.
It's not great. It's not great.
Yeah.
And because then you have people who say if you can't beat them, you shouldn't be fighting for the belt. Same thing they say about DDP right now going into the Whittaker fight. But, you have to have contenders. You want to just kill them all off.
Yep.
It's a really tough spot. I want to put a pin in the Topuria talk for a moment because we're about to talk to him in about 15 minutes. I think the other big story of the weekend was what happened Friday at the PFL event in Atlanta. It wasn't so much what OAM did or Sadib Boussaï did. Both of them had tremendous wins, and they've turned into, pretty solid stars, champions, contenders, whatever you want to call them for the PFL. But we need to talk about the Raush Manfio versus Natan Shulte fight, which has led to a whole bunch of controversy. In case you missed it, these 2 friends and teammates who trained together, an American top team, were scheduled to fight each other and did, in fact, quote-unquote, fight on the prelims of the PFL event on June 23rd. They fought as part of their lightweight regular season. And Shulte got the W, and as a result of that, we all thought he was, en route to advancing based on what happened in the Shane Burgos fight, and because of the way in which the Shane Burgos fight ended, the points and all that stuff. Shulte, when we went to bed, at least the public went to bed on Friday. They pronounce Shulte, by the way, New York Rick. They don't say Schulte. They pronounce the E. Just saying. I know you're writing to me, but that's how they say it. I don't know. I was just anyway. We all thought that he was advancing. Then we wake up on Saturday morning, and we got this press release last night. Natan Shulte and Raush Manfio did not meet the standards which all PFL fighters agreed to uphold in competition. All fighters in their PFL fight agreements agreed to use their, quote, best efforts, skills, and abilities as a professional athlete to compete and defeat any opponent. It was very clear that Natan and Raush did not meet that contractual standard in yesterday's bout. PFL immediately suspended both fighters from the season and deemed the fight to have 0 points for purposes of league standings. PFL takes this action in recognition of its responsibility to all PFL fighters and all PFL fans. As a result, it's now Clay Collard versus Shane Burgos. Burgos is the one that advanced, and then OAM versus Bruno Miranda. And so I'll be honest with you guys, I was not watching the prelims live, but I saw people tweeting about it. So I went back to watch before I saw this, because I wanted to, like, people were saying this was a weird fight. It was off, this and that. And I was like, all right, let me watch this. So I watched it early Saturday morning, I believe it was. Yes. Before, because this came out at like 9 a.m.-ish on Saturday. So I watched it. I was like, let me see what the big deal is. This was a very weird fight. Some called it a glorified sparring match. I would say there was no sparring going on here. I would say this was two friends who did not want to hurt each other, who felt very uncomfortable fighting, and had some sort of gentleman's agreement that they would not beat each other up, that they would not hurt each other, that they would not fight, which led to a very awkward fight, which, the broadcasters were talking about it off the jump, like almost like they were expecting this, right? And then what made it even weirder was the fact that they spoke about the fact that the corners agreed not to give any sort of instruction during the fight. So in between rounds, all they were doing was drinking water, sitting down, and that was it. It was complete silence. It was supremely awkward. It was supremely weird. And so after doing a little bit of digging, here's my take on what happened. Because I know a lot of people are upset about this. It feels fishy, especially when Shane Burgos, who is their big fish, their big free agent signing, is the one who benefited the most from it. Can I just be honest with you guys? I don't even know how to feel about this 3 days later. Because on the one hand, you have Shulte and Manfio knew they were going to fight each other. Did they raise a stink? Did they try to change it? Did one pull out? To me, if you were going to fight like that, one of you should have just pulled out. Now, I know PFL paid them their show and ultimately win. And so you made that money, but like no one fought. And so like, what did you think was going to happen? It's not the first time two friends, two teammates have had to fight each other. And when you're a part of a tournament like this, that's essentially what it is, sometimes you're going to be forced to, be in awkward situations. Both these guys have been products of the PFL system. They have both benefited from the PFL system. Both have won their lightweight tournament before and got the $1 million and all that stuff. So what did you think was going to happen? You were going to do this pitter-pat thing, and then no one was going to notice? Or, and I can understand this side of the equation, you say, hey, I got the W, I move on, and that's that. Now, according to their fight agreements, it says you have to use your best efforts, skills, and abilities as a professional athlete to compete and defeat any opponent, and that they can reserve the right to do something like this if need be. It just is a slippery slope. Have they been faced with this situation a lot? No. Is it worth using this as the example to like, hey, if anyone ever does this, we are going to do that? I feel like that was the smarter thing and the less icky thing to do. By doing this first time, it happens, and as a result, the big fish gets the backdoor entrance into the playoffs. It's a weird look, and PFL likes to tout itself as the place where it's all about meritocracy. It's all about no matchmakers. We take that out of the equation. ultimately, if we're truly going to tout ourselves as the league, you don't necessarily. It's a weird one because if you win a shitty game in the NFL playoffs, you're still advancing, right? But in this case, there's points involved, right? There's knockout, there's this, that, you get points. So it's not exactly apples to apples, but ultimately it's survive and advance. And it was survive and advance. Now, if they find out that there was some collusion, that they worked the fight, that's a whole different thing. But the fact that they paid them makes me think that they don't believe that it was a worked fight. I would also say, if I'm the corners and I'm the fighters, I just would have agreed. Like, listen, we don't want to do this. It's going to be 15 minutes of uncomfortableness. But like to not give any instructions or anything like that to me was a little bit weird. I don't have to see them. I don't have to see the other guy in the gym, so it's easy for me sitting here and saying that. But as you can see here, I still don't really know how to feel about it because I think that it was a very awkward fight. It was a very weird fight. It did not feel like a real fight. It didn't even feel like a sparring match. It felt like they were doing like a capoeira dance. Like they weren't even like trying to hurt each other. And then they would grapple for a minute or two and be like, okay, cool. And let's go sit and have some water. It was very, very strange. And even Shulte afterwards was very emotional. But then on the flip side, it's like now it just feels like PFL is trying to matchmake when they say that they don't. I did hear, and take this for what you will, that they made the call and they told both fighters before Burgos fought that they were going to do this. They didn't make this call on Saturday. They made it in the middle of the fight. Does that change anyone's opinion on it? It looks weird that it's Burgos of all people that gets, the benefit here. I don't know. I don't even know if what I'm saying is coherent. What do you guys make of all of this? Did you guys watch this? Do you feel as conflicted? I think ultimately what I would have decided in closing is I wouldn't have done this. I would have used this as the example in the future of what not to do. And by the way, try to avoid these situations as far as matchmaking. You don't want in. One of you has to excuse yourself from the fight. But ultimately, you let the fight play out. You kind of have to deal with the consequences is what I'm landing on.
It's a very complicated situation. I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. One of them being like, what's the line between choreographing a fight and just agreeing to certain terms, right? Like that's a very like thin and fine line. I don't think anybody necessarily threw a fight, but if they agree to certain terms and then that's the end product, you kind of wonder like how much conversation happens beforehand. So it becomes very murky. I think PFL is well within their right to look at that fight, quote unquote fight, and say something happened here and we need to take action to punish this. But I think they probably got a little ahead of themselves, right? The commission didn't take away a win from Natan. They're
not even investigating it. Like, actually, I think they suspended him for a week, right?
But when you say suspension, you're talking the standard suspension for like
nothing.
Recovery from a fight, not related to
got it.
Punitive. And it gets into dicey territory where you have to determine like the value of if the two fighters had a conversation beforehand, how far to take that, how seriously to take that, what the conversations were with the league, if at all, before this, right? The league is choosing this matchup. Did they have a conversation about, hey, we expect you guys to fight even though you're friends? I think there's an argument. I would listen to an argument of if we match them up with other people and ultimately these two guys got to the championship and then we got this in our championship, you would hope to avoid that. So I think there's an argument to be made like, hey, we're hoping to make this fight in the regular season, eliminate the potential for this happening in the playoffs or in the championship, have them fight the fight and have a conversation with them that says, hey, we expect you guys to compete and not to do this, and let the chips fall where they may. But it feels like there was just a lot of potential steps missed here in terms of what could have been done prior to the bout happening.
So ultimately, what should they have done?
They can't do this, in my opinion.
They should have let Natan.
Natan has to advance.
Yeah,
I think Natan had to advance as well. Clearly, they had plans of what they were going to do going into it. If you just watch the fight, I think they landed like 30 combined punches throughout the entire thing. And as soon as it finishes, you can just see the like emotion and the awkwardness on both dudes' face. Natan goes over to his corner, is bowing. They're hugging the entire time. it felt like they had full plans of exactly what was going to happen going into it.
Yeah, it was awkward to watch. The aftermath was awkward because you could tell they were both unhappy, right? They were not. I don't know. Again, it's impossible to know what the agreement was.
That's the thing.
The corner
It's-
thing I didn't
that
like.
gray area.
The corner
the
thing is what
problem.
made me feel like there was an agreement beforehand, right?
That's the
There
problem.
had to have been one with
That's
the,
the
with the
problem.
with the way that they fought. And now that I'm saying those words, like I guess that technically is fight fixing.
I'd put it this way. Ultimately, I don't know what the right answer is, but I know that I don't feel good about either party in this scenario, right? I don't feel good about what the fighters did, and I don't feel good about what ultimately PFL's final steps were. But I also find it hard to blame either side either, right? Like if you're the fighters, did the PFL have a conversation with you about what they expect if this fight is booked? If you're the PFL, getting that product on your air as part of your tournament, I understand being upset and trying to take action against it as well. There's really no winners here. It's really just a losing scenario. And
Finding
an
out that
unfortunate
they
scenario.
made the decision before the Burgos fight, does that change your opinion on it?
It makes it a little shadier, in my opinion. The
Why?
idea that, well, if you're Shane Burgos, who needed to have a definitive win to kind of even keep yourself alive for a playoff spot,
An
and then
early
come
finish,
out-
a very early
you
finish.
needed an early finish and then come out and have a decision where it was wrestling heavy. And if that decision was made before your fight, that doesn't look great.
Yeah.
And by the way, please let me be very, very clear. I'm not accusing Shane Burgos of anything.
Yeah.
He may be completely separate from this scenario, but from the PFL's perspective, it does not help your case. It does not help
Right.
your argument in stopping that conversation. I would never. We've seen Shane Burgos fight. Shane Burgos is a gamer, is a fighter. I would not question that ever, ever, ever. But what I'm saying is, from an optics perspective, if you're the PFL and you say before Shane Burgos fights, all he needs to get is a win to get in now, it looks different. It looks different.
No, you're 100%. You're 100% right. Very, very, very bizarre
Yeah,
situation.
incredibly weird situation, and it doesn't help the PFL that the guy that came from the UFC and is in all their commercials when they go to commercial break is the guy that got in.
Yeah.
What sucks is Burgos is going to be now tied to this. Like it's
100%.
him getting in is unavoidable, but he's not involved. Like he's a benefit of something that happened here, but it's not his decision. He had nothing to do with it. They're
He posted
making the
he
decision.
posted a video when he landed in Newark saying like he just found out the news when he landed.
It's unfortunate because it is.
Well,
he
that
involved
is,
in that
by the way,
concept.
that's different than what
That's
what I
what
heard.
I'm saying.
Yes, I
that
don't know.
to me is weird. The whole situation in and of itself, from the fight to how they handled it, is just a bizarre
Ultimately,
scenario.
and by the way, for full transparency, if that was the case, they should have said it on the broadcast.
Say it.
They should have said it on the
Yeah,
broadcast that we're
as
making
soon as
this
it was
call.
over.
Yes.
because I mean everyone was talking about it. That's all I saw on social media.
I think they skipped some steps in handing out this punishment. They needed a little more transparency, a little more communication, in my opinion.
We're going to talk more about this, and I want to get Chael's perspective on it. But ultimately, where I've netted out is this should have been a teachable moment. This should have been exhibit A of what not to do. But ultimately, I think Natan should have moved on because he got the win and the fight went on, and it just creates a bigger mess for the promotion, and now it's going to be on Shane, and that's not really fair to him, even though he has an opportunity to make $1 million as a result of all this. All right,